Hey there, Buck Bookers, and welcome to a very special episode of BucksBooks. Perhaps the second longest awaited episode of BucksBooks since the page's inception. I will not be reviewing Between Two Fires. You're going to keep waiting for that, but I will be reviewing 5 books that are somehow less Catholic than Between Two Fires. So first, let's do the quick blessing. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, and we're good to go. First, I'd like to explain the system by which I will be judging the Catholicism of each of these books. Now, as you can see by the chart, which I hope to put on this side when I get to the editing, there are 5 categories. They are pro-social behavior, an important component of Catholicism, at least allegedly, and you really can't argue that something is Christian, because the word, when used as an adjective, essentially just means pro-social. Now, if you let me go on long enough, I can get to how I believe that every religion is functionally pro-social, with the possible exception of, Levian Satanism, but even that is developed to be pro-social specifically for the, 12 people in that church, and also for attention. In any case, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't include it as one of the primary drives behind what makes it Catholicism. We can dress it up as what makes it Christianity if you want. I'm not that picky. Next up, we got vampire aesthetics and iconography, and here we start to see the very specific Catholic distinction. Because some of these churches, they're just like community centers, they're just like big, ugly, brown box buildings. I don't have sufficient knowledge. I feel like this is the part where I would be criticizing other branches of Christianity that weren't Catholicism if I had a better understanding of them. I don't know which ones have the ugly churches. I know there are a lot of ugly churches out there. And I know that you can tell the tasteful ones, the ones that really go off with the stained glass and the Gothic accoutrement. Very vampire, very Dracula. So the thing about Catholicism is all of it is very Dracula. All of it is very Castlevania. And because of that, it's too important to leave out of how we are going to judge these books. Third, faith as a vehicle for incredible violence. Again, we could make the argument that that's true of virtually all religions, with the notable exception of Buddhism, but I'm pretty sure they're fighting wars about that, right? Isn't there a Tibet thing going on? I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know. What I am going to state that I know conclusively is we can ascribe both the Inquisition and the Crusades to the Catholic Church. So faith as a vehicle for incredible violence is also something we can't really leave out of what makes Catholicism Catholic. Next up, the term Mother Church. This is a big one. This is a very Catholic thing. Not every book is going to have this. Not every allegedly Catholic book. Sometimes they don't allege to be Catholic, but they wind up being really Catholic, as in the case of Between Two Fires, which, once again, I will not be reviewing today. But that one did contain the term Mother Church, just for the record. And finally, shame as a personality trait. This, I feel, is fairly self-explanatory. The entirety of the religion is built around feeling really, really bad, and then you go to church, and you tell the priest how bad you feel, and the priest tells you to say a couple Hail Marys, and you go and you say a couple Hail Marys, and then you're ready to get ashamed all over again. Your shame is lifted, which just makes room for new shame. It's like crop rotation. So that's what makes Catholicism Catholicism. And these are the criteria by which I'm going to judge. I'm going to judge, much like God our Father, these books. So, without further ado, I would like to begin with the least Catholic of these top 5 books that are only slightly less Catholic than Between Two Fires. And this may come as a surprise to some, But in spot number 5, we have Malus Maleficarum by Heinrich Kramer. Now, my Latin is not as sharp as it once was, so if you know how to pronounce Malus Maleficarum correctly, feel free to show up in the comments and use like the standardized like dictionary with like the umlauts and the schwa. You can do that, and I won't amend the video because YouTube it's a real hassle to screw with the video after you upload it. You have to like re-upload it, but I will put it in the description if you correct that. But until you do that, I'm going to go ahead and continue to pronounce it Malus Maleficarum. That is a hammer for witches, or as I learned it, a hammer to strike witches. I learned that from the Werewolf Encyclopedia, which was a book about primarily serial killers, but like some werewolf folklore that I read when I was 9, proving that you can really just publish anything. So, for those who are not acquainted with Malus Maleficarum, it was the book that drove the Inquisition. It is a handbook and manual for how to find witches, how to root them out, how to most effectively torture them into confessing their dark pacts with the devil, and then how to execute them to ensure that they can no longer blight your crops. So, referring to the chart, as we can see, scores 0 for pro-social behavior, because ultimately it can be argued that the design for Malus Maleficarum was to ensure pro-social behavior, because they're trying to look out for the desperate peasants and trying to ensure that nobody gets turned into donkeys and ridden all night or whatever it was that they were afraid witches were doing when everyone was crushed on the ergot. But ultimately what they accomplished was the burning of a lot of innocent women, and even if they got a couple of witches, they got a lot more innocent women. So that's not super pro-social. And it caused hysteria, to the term that we now use, witch hunt, to the point where we now use the term witch hunt to describe mass hysteria and like unfair trials. I gotta give that a 0 for the pro-social behavior. Nothing there. Also, vampire aesthetics and iconography. Nothing showing, and that was very disappointing. Because you'd think that they're witch hunters, so they probably have the same... It's drip now. It's not swag. Probably have the same drip as the vampire hunters, right? Like the Van Helsings. They don't... Witch hunters just... They weren't dressing. No vampire aesthetics or iconography to speak of. Now, faith is a vehicle for incredible violence. Yes, we got that in spades. And as you can see, the unit that I am using to qualify whether one meets the criterion is a statue of the Virgin Mary who is crying blood. So we have one blood-weeping Virgin Mary for faith as a vehicle for incredible violence. And it's really inarguable because, again, this is the book that launched the Inquisition. That's probably the most incredible violence that was accomplished by a book in the name of faith. And I mean, I'm not going to say ever, because that's a hard one, but certainly in the past 500 years, maybe 400 years. Any historians want to show up and refute me in the comments? That's totally fine. We're here to entertain and educate. I wish to learn. I wish to learn. The term Mother Church. This is used extensively. They really delivered on the Mother Church in Malus Maleficarum. And finally, shame is a personality trait. That was sadly lacking. To the point where our boy Heinrich Kramer probably could have benefited from it, because he had no shame in what he was doing. He was 100% he was in the right, which is always a mistake, just psychologically speaking. If you are 100% that you are correct about what you're doing, you're probably not. That's probably delusional. You gotta get that fact checked. You gotta kick it around in an echo chamber that doesn't totally respect you, so you know they're not just yesing you to death. And then, but as far as Kramer himself, he was denounced or his ideas were at least, later on in his career. Straight from Wikipedia, Kramer failed in his attempt to obtain endorsement for his work from the top theologians of the Inquisition at the faculty of Cologne, and they condemned the book as recommending unethical and illegal procedures, as well as being inconsistent to what they perceived as the orthodox Catholic doctrines of demonology. So let me run that by again. The top theologians of the Inquisition said, this book is too real. It's too heavy. We can't be doing this. Get this guy out of here. Right? So, still, he wasn't ashamed of it, and he continued intensely writing and preaching until his death in Moravia in 1505. So, that about closes it up for our boy Heinrich Kramer, and for Mels Maleficarum. That's spot number 5. Spot number 4, we have the Confessions of St. Augustine. This is itself a blindingly Catholic book. This is one of the books that will be recommended to you if you express interest in Catholic literature for some reason. It was a slog. I'm not gonna lie. I really dragged my feet through this. I was hoping it would be one of like those, because he's a great thinker, so I was hoping it'd be like one of those Marcus Aurelius meditation situations, and I guess it kind of was, but it mostly wasn't. It mostly was just our boy St. Augustine just really fluffing God just the whole way through. But in terms of the chart, very little pro-social behavior was recommended. In fact, I'd go so far as to describe it as primarily antisocial behavior. And yet still it didn't make the book that interesting. In terms of vampire aesthetics and iconography, absolutely delivered on that. 100%. He was living in Roman North Africa. If you Google a picture of St. Augustine of Hippo right now, top hit is going to be this gorgeous stained glass number of him just like top to bottom, you know, real vampire stuff. I envy the fit. I wish I could be dressing like that, honestly, especially now that it's cold and I'm out here in the Henley. Like I could use Augustine's stylist. So, gotta give him the vampire aesthetics and iconography. Faith as a vehicle for incredible violence, not represented. He did not advocate for any violence whatsoever. None. It was very, very turn the other cheek, which is probably why he's such a prominent writer in that school of thought. But ultimately, it makes the whole process less Catholic, you know? The term Mother Church, couldn't stop using it. He loved, Augustine was saying Mother Church every page, probably. Every 2 pages, maybe. Constant Mother Church. He loved church like his own mother, who he also loved, and who got him into God. His mother turned him on to God, and they bonded over that. And finally, shame as a personality trait. The book is called Confessions, and it's about all of the weird sex stuff he did. So let me make that interesting. But he really just lamented how horny he was and how it ruined his relationship with, not anything else, just his relationship with God. He was really concerned about what God thought of him, you know, sowing his wild oats and stealing the wild pears. Well, they were cultivated pears. I think they were a neighbor's pears, and that's why it was such a big deal that he stole them. With the boys, he and the boys were out, and he said, I didn't even want to steal them, but the boys wanted to steal them, so I enjoyed it that much more. But did I enjoy it that much more because I was stealing with the boys? Probably, but that was one of the confessions. So ultimately, only 3 crying, bleeding Virgin Mary statues for the Confessions of St. Augustine. Not as Catholic as we were led to believe. Number 3 on the chart is a pretty little ditty called Defenders of the West. The Christian heroes who stood against Islam. Nothing invective about that title, huh? By our man Raymond Ibrahim. Now, Raymond Ibrahim is a fascinating critter. If you look him up, he's just massive. He's colossal. And he maintains that he is himself not any sort of Christian. He denies Catholicism, like Peter. He denies any association with Christianity in general. And by trade, he is an Islamologist. He's studied Islam for his entire academic career, and he's written several books about the topic, but he very discernibly hates Islam. Like, he has an agenda, and that agenda is decidedly pro-Christendom, if not pro-Christian, but he swears on a stack of Bibles that he's a neutral party. No. So let's see how neutral his book was. First of all, pro-social behavior. Ultimately got to give it to him because he insisted during Defenders. So, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Defenders of the West is a sort of collection of 10-ish historical figures who figured prominently in the Crusades, almost entirely in the Crusades. And these were all just these heavy-handed, just, most of them were warriors, a couple of them were financiers. All of them had very significant roles to play in the Crusades in attempting to take Jerusalem. We got Sir Godfrey, who was a menace. Like, it tells the story about how he cut this Turkish general in half, and half of the general rode back into town on a horse to great wailing and lamentation. The historians described the entire town as screaming upon sight of the half a general as though they were all pregnant women. It was incredibly metal. Godfrey himself took Jerusalem and refused to be called king of Jerusalem because he was too pious. So there you go. Very Christian hero standing against Islam move there. There's a Vlad the Impaler redemption arc right there at the end, which, if nothing else, the book is worth checking out for that. You would not believe that you'd be pro-Vlad, but just hear him out. So ultimately, pro-social behavior. I understand that it's a ballsy move to say that this book advocates pro-social behavior right after I say that it also advocates Vlad the Impaler. I understand that, but you just have to go with me on this one, because ultimately the narrative that Ibrahim is trying to push is that the Crusades were defensive wars, efforts to reclaim territory that had been taken during raids. And so to that end, the behavior of these defenders, the titular defenders of the West, were pro-social because they were in the service of Christendom. They were in the service of defense of the West. That's everybody they knew. You know? And I'll leave you to read the book. I'm not going to make his case for him, because I'm not trying to get banned from YouTube or whatever. Vampire aesthetics and iconography, sadly lacking. Very little of that. There just wasn't a lot present. I think it's because it focused so heavily on the Crusades and the Crusaders. So a lot of it was just like a red cross on white tunic dealy. And again, a little splash of irony here, because Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Dracul, is one of the main characters that we're looking at in this book, and we still can't give it vampire aesthetics and iconography because he wasn't technically a vampire. That's an anachronism. Sorry about it. How about faith as a vehicle for incredible violence? Yes, 100%. We can just stamp it, send it, it's good. The term Mother Church, used extensively over the course of the book, a little more tongue-in-cheek. It's mostly in the form of references that were made by the other historians from which Ibrahim drew everything that he made the book out of. Because these are all first-hand accounts. And that's what's most interesting about the book. They're first-hand accounts from both sides of the war. So he's drawing first-hand accounts from, of course, what the people like Sir Godfrey and Vlad the Impaler were supposed to have said. We're quoted as saying, but he's also drawing first-hand accounts from the Islamic forces, from the Ottoman Turk, who are talking about pressing into the conquest of Constantinople and taking the slaves and what they did with the slaves, and it's worth reading. It's a good read. It's a good read, but not that Catholic. I mean, still fairly Catholic. More Catholic. 3 Bloody-Eyed Marys is more Catholic than most books. Still not as Catholic as some of the books we have to come. In spot number 2, we have... We're going to say the Doom books, but what we mean is the entire Doom franchise. Now, the Doom books sucked. They sucked so bad. However, they are books, and these are books that we're talking about. So I'm going to use those books as a bridge, sort of the same kind of dimensional gateways that they talked about in the terrible Doom books, in order to bring in the entirety of the Doom franchise, because it is inarguably the most Catholic possible video game franchise on the market right now. Canonically, Doom guy, Doomslayer, I never got on board with the Doomslayer thing. I know since 2016 we had the rebrand, but he's always going to be Doom guy to me. And canonically speaking, Doom guy is eligible for the papacy because he is canonically a Catholic within the Catholic canon, as well as the Doom canon. And then also, he is confirmed to be a virgin by John Carmack, I believe. Not 100%. I think it's John Carmack. And so what I like most about Doom, because I'm ride or die for the franchise, everything they've ever made I've loved. I loved. I even played Doom 3 in its entirety. And that was different, but still, like, I regret nothing. I've beaten all of them on Nightmare. I'm so serious about Doom. Man, I can't express to you how serious I am about Doom. And this has nothing to do with its religious affiliation. What I like about Doom is that Doom guy is just a guy. And they kind of screwed with that a little bit, but they wound up stepping it back, because if you see the lore in the most recent video games, including the Elder Gods, Ancient Gods, whatever the hell is, expansions, Doom guy was just a guy the whole time. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he woke up and there were demons, and he was like, well, guess I better kill all of them with my hands. And then he just continued to do that. And the situation kept escalating, and so Doom guy kept escalating, and I think that's beautiful. He's just so mad. He's just so mad about the state of the place, and he's going to fix it with a chainsaw, just with ripping and tearing. And he's the hero that we need. He is pure agency. He is autonomy manifest. And he is a good, wholesome Christian role model for the children. From the top, pro-social behavior. There is nothing more pro-social than what you're doing in Doom. They are demons. They are demons, and they are here to just do, like, you ever see The Devil's Rejects, I think it was? One of the Rob Zombie movies, where Otis, that gross Charlie Manson knockoff, comes out and says, I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work. Well, they're devils, and they're here to do the devil's work. And Doom guy, more recently known as Doomslayer, formerly known as Corporal Flynn Fly Taggart in those horrible books that I advise you never touch. Doom guy is here to do God's work. And so he just rips them apart with his hands. Just like pulls their face open. It's just nothing more pro-social than that. He's doing that for mankind. He's also doing that for his own edification, yes. But the more he's edified, the more mankind benefits. And what could be more altruistic than that? Perfect. He needs the bleeding, crying Mary for pro-social behavior. Vampire aesthetics and iconography. I don't think anyone can argue that Doom is replete with that. I'm happy with the arrangement I have in here. It's very minimalist, it's very stripped down. But if I had millions of dollars and my druthers, I would have just my whole zone decorated by the guys who did art for Doom, graphic design for Doom, 100%. Vampire aesthetics and iconography are well represented through every single game in the entirety of the franchise. Naturally, that also bled over into the terrible novelizations, which cannot overstate that you should not read. Faith is a vehicle for incredible violence. Yes. Now, the incredible violence is sort of separate from the faith unless you consider the demons to be a component of the faith, which I do. So, by virtue of them being demons, we have to assume that they are demons from hell, and if they're from hell, we are working within some sort of Judeo-Christian canon, right? Because otherwise it would have another name than hell. But it doesn't. It's the one of the first episodes was called, second episode, as a matter of fact, of the original Doom, was called The Shores of Hell. So, we know it's hell. Doom 2, hell on earth. We know it's hell. We know they're demons from hell, which means they are in direct defiance of God, which means Doom Guy is an instrument of God, like Silent Bob. And he just obliterates them in his mercy. Amen. The term Mother Church is not used. Very little reference to the church in Doom. In fact, I would go so far as to say there is no canonical reference to the church, the Catholic Church, in the Doom franchise. At least none that I've spotted. They dance around it a lot, but it's never direct. And what we do know about Doom Guy interfacing with the Catholic Church comes from John Romero, mostly John Carmack, but a couple of John Romero tweets. So, cannot give him Mother Church. And shame is a personality trait. What does he have to be ashamed of? He's very taciturn, you know. He's very driven. He's disciplined. He has taken the Eucharist, I believe. And he's out there just trying to kill demons and make the world a better place. And that's beautiful. That's so good. That is Christ-like. Jesus himself could do no better. Well, I mean, Jesus himself just kind of just zapped them, you know. So it's arguable that that's better, but like for my purposes, I would rather see the cyber demon get its arm torn off and just like jammed up something. That's fine. That's what I'm here for. I don't think I would have pre-ordered a game where Jesus just zapped them, if we're being honest. And that might be a personal failing, but I'm being honest. That said, we cannot put shame as a personality trait as a facet of Doom because there's nothing to be ashamed of, and so he is not ashamed. He's just doing what he has to do. He's ripping and tearing until it is done. As such, that's only 3 crying statues of the Virgin Mary, which is more Catholic than Malleus Maleficarum, and roughly as Catholic as the next 2. And finally, the number 1 most Catholic book that is still less Catholic than Between Two Fires, the Bible. I'm not going to explain the Bible. You know what the Bible is. Let's go from the top. Pro-social behavior. Ultimately, yes. Not going to say all of it's pro-social. There were some rough patches in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. But for the most part, and especially in the New Testament, what they're trying to say is do unto others. You could do worse than the 10 Commandments. It's ultimately pro-social behavior. In fact, the entirety of the books, like we talked about before, it was written as sort of a code for, well, the Old Testament strikes me as having been written as a code of conduct for pastoralists. You know, these were people who lived in the desert, who lived in these more tribal communities. They mostly got by herding animals of some kind. So eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, very small communities, just barely out of the hunter-gatherer epoch. It makes sense to push that kind of morality. And then you look at the New Testament, and the New Testament seems more geared to situations where we are developing more elaborate civilizations. We have cities. We have megalopolises. Megalopoli? We have Rome. We have just these sprawling situations where there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people on top of each other to the point that we need to develop aqueducts or we'll all die of plague. And then they died of plague anyway, because there were just too many people in one place. So when you're there, you can no longer rely on these Hammurabi codes. You need to develop a sort of ethical system that travels with the person, like an externalized superego who will smite them to the earth, and not just for opposing the children of Israel, which was much of the main thrust of the Old Testament, but for just being bad, for being adulterous or doing things that increase your likelihood of transmitting infection. And that, or stealing or lying or, all that other crap. Being a sociopath. Basically, for all the stuff that makes you be a sociopath, you're not supposed to do that anymore, because we can't keep an eye out and we can't punish sociopaths in the same way, because there are too many people and you can disappear into a city. So pro-social behavior was ultimately what they were after with it. Vampire aesthetics and iconography? Oh yes. Big time. This is where it comes from. Jesus on the cross, man? The crucifixion? Are you kidding me? Mwah. Faith as a vehicle for incredible violence. Yes, this book started mad wars. Straight up. It's not a criticism. No, you don't gotta pray for me or whatever. You don't have to smite me. You don't have to protest me or anything like that. It's just this mad wars would not have happened in the same way or along the same lines if not for this book. So yes, faith as a vehicle for incredible violence cannot be denied. The Bible contributed to that, whether it meant to or not. The term Mother Church, very often. All through the New Testament. Yes. A lot of mother churches. Gotta have a lot of mother churches. We're establishing the Mother Church. Shame as a personality trait? No. Shame is there. Shame is represented. Shame is discussed. But shame is not used as a personality trait for virtually any character in the Bible. Shame is punished. Shame is used as a punishment. Shame is weaponized extensively in the Bible. Shame is discussed. Shame is explained. But no one embodies shame. So, despite its best efforts, the Holy Bible of Christianity has failed to be as Catholic a book as Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. Because Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman fills the chart. 5 bleeding, crying Virgin Marys for pro-social behavior, vampire aesthetics, and iconography, faith as a vehicle for incredible violence, term Mother Church, a shameless personality trait. All of them are well represented to the point that none of them can be denied, and that is almost just like, that's the concept. That's the concept of that book. So read that book. And before we finish, I would like to throw in a quick runner-up. Hellmouth. Hellmouth is also exceedingly Catholic. Hellmouth technically should score higher than a couple of them, but Hellmouth is only like 60 pages long, so I don't think it deserved to be in the running in the same way. But yeah, as far as, I didn't make a chart for it, but as far as the chart goes, the only one it's really missing out on is pro-social behavior, because everyone in that book is sort of a novella. Everyone in that novella is sort of a turd. They're all bad people, but they're bad people who wind up going into hell, ostensibly for good reasons. But I've got my own little book report on that if you want to check it out. And that brings our probably the most Catholic book review system that I'm ever going to do to a close. Thank you for tuning in. If you are interested in hearing more, much of it will be less pious than this. Like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends, Street Team for me, print out some stickers, and just put them all over your town. And if you liked any of these books, show up in the comments and let's talk about these books. I will always talk about any of these books. I will have a hard time talking about the Bible. I have not read it to the same depth as the rest of these books, but in my defense, the rest of these books are far shorter and easier to read. That's enough out of me. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.